bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya.
Body is strong enough. One should quickly adopt the process of atonement according to Shastra. Otherwise one's time will be lost and the reactions of his sins will increase. As an expert physician diagnoses and treats a disease according to its gravity, one should undergo atonement according to the severity of one's sins. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The Dharma Shastras, like the Manu Samhita, prescribe that a man who has committed murder should be hanged and his own life sacrificed in atonement. Previously this system was followed all over the world, but since people are becoming atheists, they are stopping capital punishment. This is not wise. Herein it is said that a physician who knows how to diagnose a disease prescribes medicine accordingly. If the disease is very serious, the medicine must be strong. The weight of a murderous sin is very great, and therefore, according to Manu Samhita, a murderer must be killed. By killing a murderer, the government shows mercy to him, because if a murderer is not killed in this life, he will be killed and forced to suffer many times in future lives. Since people do not know body next life and the intricate workings of nature, they manufacture their own laws, but they should properly consult the established injunctions of the Shastras and act accordingly. In India, even today, the Hindu community often takes advice from expert scholars regarding how to counteract sinful activities. In Christianity also there is a process of confession and atonement. Therefore, atonement is required, and atonement must be undergone according to the gravity of one's sinful activities. tasmāt puraivaśv pāpa-niṣkṛtau yateta mṛtyor avipadyatātmanā doṣasya dṛṣṭvā guru-lāghavaṁ yathā bhiṣak cikitseta rujāṁ nidāna-vit. So, over here again, the emphasis is on atonement. One may wonder, why are there so many verses in this section of the Bhagavatam all aiming towards the same point? The verse we discussed yesterday also more or less was making the same point, that one must atone. And again, it is pointed out that one must atone, and over here it is pointed out that one should undergo atonement according to the severity of one's sins. So, the different types of atonements, there are 20 types of religious scriptures which are known as the Dharma Shastras, beginning with the Manu Samhita and Parasha Samhita. So there are 20 different types of Dharma Shastras. And in these Dharma Shastras, there is reference to different types of atonement that one can realize. And then the conclusion of the different types of atonement is there in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam. That is, that the other types of atonement are not really complete. It is pointed out in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam by Srila Goswami that the other types of atonement are not considered complete because one may perform certain other yajnas to free himself from the sins that one has committed. But because the root or the desire is still there to commit sins again, the desire is still there in the heart to engage in that activity again, that atonement is not considered to be complete. Therefore, Parikshit Maharaj has said, Kanjana for, that is, Kanjana, this type of atonement is compared by Parikshit Maharaj to be like the beating of an elephant. An elephant goes and takes bath in the river, then as soon as it comes out, the elephant again sits in mud and again it dirties its body. So Parikshit Maharaj has said So this is Kanjana Socha. That is, it is just like the breathing of an elephant. So these types of atonements are not really complete. But the real atonement is, if somehow or the other one gets attached to the holy names of the Lord. This is the whole purpose of this chapter of the Bhagavatam and this whole section of the Bhagavatam. After describing the different types of atonement, it is explained what is real atonement. For example, in the 3rd chapter of this canto, it is stated, devotees who always lick the honey from the lotus feet of Lord Krishna do not care at all for material activities which are performed under the 3 modes of material nature and which bring only misery. Indeed, devotees never give up the lotus feet of Krishna to return to material activities. So, that's the difference. The devotees, they find complete satisfaction in the lotus feet of Krishna. So by chanting the holy names of Krishna, one develops attachment to the lotus feet of Krishna, and hence he does not want to return to materialistic activities. Whereas if one atones by following these Dharma Shastras, which are 20 in number, because the root is still there, the desire is still there, one can again commit sinful activities. And Prabhupada states that in the purport over here, one may sometimes chant with offenses and sometimes without offenses. But if one seriously adopts the process, he will achieve perfection which cannot be achieved through Vedic ritualistic ceremonies of atonement. So the real atonement is the atonement that one can realize by chanting the holy names of Krishna. Just like we had given the example yesterday of the dry leaves. They may get burnt, even now they may be lying beneath the bamboo tree. Because the roots are there under the earth, the roots can again sprout. So in this section of the Bhagavatam, Srila Goswami analyzes the different types of atonement. The atonement that one can realize by karma kanda, the atonement that one can realize by jnana kanda, and the conclusion is, the real atonement is when one chants the holy names of Krishna. One can chant the holy names of Krishna, doesn't matter how serious an offender may be. For example, in this 6th canto, it is pointed out that one who indulges in illicit sex, one who is a murderer, one who is a thief, one who is a butcher, doesn't matter what the person may be, he can really atone by getting attached to the holy names of Krishna. Because when one chants the holy names of Krishna, Krishna says, this person is attached to my name, and therefore it is my duty to give him protection. So unfortunately today, this process of atonement is not being appreciated by the society by and large, because the materialist doesn't even realize or understand that this life is only temporary. This material life is very temporary, and the real identity of the living being, namely the soul, is eternal. This whole explanation is there in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, na jayate niyate va kadachin, that the soul never takes birth and it never dies. But the living entity, the materialist namely, he is so absorbed in the karmic activities that he doesn't realize these sins that he is committing and for which he'll have to pay a severe punishment later on. This is explained very nicely by Lord Kapila to Devahuti. Lord Kapila describes how the living entity has to suffer for the performance of different types of sinful activities. Lord Kapila explains that a living entity, after he quits this body, the subtle body, consisting of the mind, intelligence, and false ego, is at once covered. The Yamadutas, that is the representatives of Lord Yamaraj, at once cover the subtle body of the individual and take him through different planets. The subtle body, which gets the new mature covering, travels a distance of 792,000 miles within few seconds. Prabhupada says that the mṛtyoras are very proud of the planes and the Sputniks that they have developed, which can travel up to 18,000-20,000 miles per hour, these airplanes. But the subtle body, when it is covered by some gross elements, by the Yamadutas, it travels through a distance of 792,000 miles within few minutes. And while it is traveling through these different planets, it experiences a lot of misery. For example, in one of the planets, there are dogs standing on both sides of the road, and the dogs bite the body. The reason the subtle body gets the mṛtyor covering is in order to make the living entity realize misery. Because unless there is this gross body, one cannot really experience the suffering, the pain, or the punishment. So, when the Yamadutas are taking the mṛtyoras to these different planets, there are dogs on both sides of the road that bite the flesh. Then there is fire on both sides of the road. Then the mṛtyoras is taken to the hellish planet where he has to eat his own flesh. Prabhupada explains that this is nothing surprising. In the Second World War, people in the concentration camps had to eat their own stew for survival. So this is something that we have seen with our own eyes. There is vivid description that how in the Second World War in the concentration camps they had to eat their own stew. So if this is possible, why is it not possible that they can eat their own that they have to eat their own flesh? So the mṛtyoras, those who have engaged in these very obnoxious, sinful activities, they are taken to the hellish planets where they have to eat their own flesh. And then the Yamadutas, they whip the living entity. And Lord Kapila describes to Devahuti the nature of the illusory energy. The illusory energy operates in two ways. One is when it covers the living entity, and the other is when it pulls down the living entity. The animals, for example. Now the animals, their intelligence is completely covered. The animal, by the arrangement of the Lord, in whatever state he is, he considers himself to be very happy. That is another nature of this illusory energy of Maya, known as Maya. It makes the living entity realize that in whatever state he is really happy. And this was exemplified in the example of Indra. Indra had not offered respect to his spiritual master, Brihaspati, and therefore he was cursed to take his body, his birth in the form of a hawk. And Indra, when he took his birth in the form of a hawk, he identified himself with the environment around him in such a perfect manner that even when Brahmaji came and requested him, please return to resume your duties, because things are not working normally. It's just like when the head of a department abstains himself from his assignment, naturally things don't work very well. So Brahmaji descended requesting Indra to please return. But Indra was so absorbed in the situation that he was and the happiness he was deriving in the company of the piglet and the she-pigs that he refused. And it was only when Brahmaji threatened him with the butcher's knife that Indra agreed to give up that association. So the point that Lord Kapila is making to Devahuti is that this Maya, which operates in two phases, one of course as he said is when it covers the intelligence of the living entity, and the other is when it pulls down the living entity. It pulls down the living entity when he takes on a human body. That is, his intelligence is completely pulled down. And those who take their birth in the lower species, including the animal species, they are very comfortable in the position that they have realized. This is the covering of, this is the act of Maya. It makes the living entity realize that whatever body he has can be enjoyed to the maximum. Like our Lord Kapila describes how, when one acquires the human form of body, then how does a living entity get entrapped in the human form of body? This should be kept in mind. Like Kapila describes that a man is made to associate with the woman, and the woman embraces the man, talks very sweet words, and the man begins to think that this is the real standard of happiness. And then children are born, and then the children speak very sweet words, and the human being gets further entangled. So, what Kapila is pointing out, that the human being, instead of engaging in self-realization or utilizing his time properly, gets completely entangled in the association of his wife and children. And then he works very, very hard. But for his own self, he hardly gets a share of that hard work that he puts. He works very, very hard, and he even robs other people. He robs other people to get some wealth for his wife and children. But then, these same wife and children for whom he is robbing, they turn around and accuse the husband of being a thief. The husband is working very hard, and he's robbing people, getting money from any source. But for himself, he's still eating the same amount. This is very nicely explained by Lord Kapila. Lord Kapila explains that as far as the mṛtyorist himself is concerned, he's eating the same amount. And when this man gets old, and he's not very capable of robbing anymore, then, like the miserly farmer, when he has a bow or an ox that cannot produce or cannot work, he just puts him aside, says, let it rot over there. So just like a miserly farmer, the housewife and the children say, oh, he has an old bull, he cannot produce anymore, so let him rot. So we can see that happening in society today. We can go to any park and it's full of old people, isn't it? Because the children are saying, here's the old bull, let him rot. So, this is the nature of the mṛtyorist who is leading a human life. He is working very hard, stealing, plundering, and still the wife and children say, you are the thief. And this was also exemplified in the case of Valmiki. Valmiki was previously a big dacoit, robber. And he would just go and rob people and bring back the wealth to his wife, children, and parents. So once Valmiki was on such a trip, then he met a great sage. And the great sage asked him, why are you committing these sins? Why are you killing and plundering everyone in the forest? What do you need all this wealth for? You're not going to eat that much. Even if I give you all this wealth that you want from me, are you going to start eating any more? But Valmiki replied that I need all this for my family. I have my parents to take care, my wife, my children. So the great sage explained, but do you realize that for all these sins that you're committing, you will have to take on sinful reaction. You're being a thief for their pleasure, but you alone will have to take on the entire suffering. And Valmiki replied, no, that's not possible. I've been stealing for such a long time and sharing everything I steal with my parents and my wife and children, so it is but natural that they will also share, if at all there was any reaction. So the great sage said, okay, you can go back and confirm with your family and children if they will share the reaction, and if they agree to share, then I will give you a lot of wealth. So the dacoit Valmiki came back first to his parents and told the parents that I have just learned that for all these dacoities that I've been committing, I'm going to face some reaction. So will you share 25% of the sinful reaction? And the parents refused. The parents said, we never asked you to commit all these thievery acts. We gave you education. We expected you will honestly earn and support us. Then he went to his wife And he told his wife, that I've been buying you all these saris and jewelry. Are you willing to share just 25% of the sinful reaction that I will have to face? She also refused. And the children also refused. And then he went back to the great sage and said, you are right. I have been committing these sinful acts for the pleasure of my parents, wife and children, but they are not willing to share the sinful reaction. And then, Valmiki was a very great criminal. He was such a great criminal that when the sage told him to chant the names of God, he could not even pronounce the name of Rama. And he could only pronounce the names of the Mara. Mara means murder. So, he was such a great dacoit that he started chanting Mara, 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 till eventually it led to Rama, Rama, Rama. So, this story confirms the instruction that Lord Kapila is giving to Devahuti. Lord Kapila is pointing out to Devahuti that the living entity, the human being, he is caught in the material world in the shackles of sex life. Just like the analogy cited, a person in a prison house. He is caught in the prison house by chains. And the chains are there on him so that he may not be able to run away. So similarly, the materialist, now one who wants to engage in just sense gratification, he is caught in the shackles of family entanglement, the family attachment, the attachment of the wife that embraces him every night, the attachment of the sweet children that speak very sweet words. This is called by Lord Kapila to be the shackles by which the living entity is made to be entangled in the material world. So, the living entity who is made to be entangled in this material world due to these attachments, he then, after death, as we said earlier, has to go to the hellish planets. And the nature of the punishment that one receives in the hellish planets is described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. What type of suffering does one get? The suffering that one gets is like in the olden days, the king, when he wanted to punish somebody, he would take that person in a boat in the middle of the river, and then one person would just be holding his hair or his hand, and the criminal would be forced to duck underwater. And then, when he was about to die, he would just be pulled up for 1 second to breathe. And then again, he would have to be forced to duck underwater. So, this is the nature of the punishment that one gets in the hellish planet. The subtle body takes on a gross covering, and the gross covering experiences severe pain. But then when the living entity is about to die because of that pain, he's given a relief for a minute. And then again when he's through that, when he again comes back to life, again he's giving, again he has to go through the suffering, and again he's given a little bit of respite. So Lord Kapila explained that the materialist who doesn't accept the purpose of human life to be service to God, this is the type of suffering. And after he has gone through the suffering in the different hellish planets, he then again receives a body. He again starts at the point where he left. Suppose he had a body, human body, and he's engaged in a lot of sinful activities. Then he has to go through all the suffering. But after he has finished his quota of suffering, then again he starts. Again he gets a body. And the body that he gets is explained is under the supervision of the Lord, based upon the simple activities that he has performed. Ātmanā daiva netrena. Lord Kapila explains that under the supervision of the Supreme Lord and based upon the results of his work, the living entity is passed on from to the sperm of the man, he again has to take his birth based upon the activities that he has performed. He enters into the semen, that is the soul, and he's then, in mixing in the woman's body, he then gets planted and he gradually begins to grow. Now, here there's an important point. That is, it's not just the mixing or the crossing of the semen that gives birth. This is made possible because the Lord as a Paramatma enters into it. The Lord as a Paramatma enters into the semen, and therefore there is life that is created. If the Lord was not there as a Paramatma, if the soul wasn't there, then there would never have been birth. So it is not just a mixture, but it's the presence of the Paramatma or the Lord in the heart of the living entity and the soul that makes it possible for birth to take place. And Lord Kapila explains that this birth is of 4 different types, according to the soul. There are different types of birth. For example, there is the birth in the embryo. Then there is a birth that comes out of earth, like in the case of trees and plants and so on. Then there is a birth that comes out of perspiration, different types of life. And then there is a birth that comes out of eggs, like different types of birds. So there are 4 different types of birth that one can take. Out of the earth, out of perspiration, out of eggs, and out of the embryo. So, the living entity takes on a body according to the karma that he has performed. This is what the materialists do not understand. The materialists do not understand that there is a law of karma. It is not that one can go on doing anything and there will be no reaction at all. There will be a reaction. So Srila Goswami over here is pointing out that based upon the severity of one's sins, one must undergo atonement. And as we have explained earlier, the real process of atonement is to get attached to the lotus feet of the Lord, because when one gets attached to the lotus feet of the Lord, there is a positive engagement. Whereas, if one follows the systems of Jnana Khanda and Karma Khanda, there is no positive engagement. And the positive engagement is that the senses get engaged in the service of the Lord. This is confirmed in the Nāda Pancharatna. Sarvapadi vinir muktam tatpar vrena nirmalam rishikina sevana bhakti ruchate. That is, by engagement of the senses in the service of Rishikesha, the owner of the senses, one becomes free from all designations. And it is the presence of these designations that is responsible for keeping us entangled in this material world. So if we want to free ourselves from all these designations, then the only alternative is engaging in the process of devotional service. And this can be commenced by taking to the chanting of the holy name. This is confirmed in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, where it is stated, Srimata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hedi Antastoya Vadrani Vedunoti Savatata. That is, this chanting of the holy name of Krishna is Punya Shravana. It is very purifying. And Abadrani means the presence of mature desires. The chanting of the holy names of Krishna is so pure that it can cleanse the heart of all the dust that is there. Chetadavan marjana. So, the Bhagavatam explains that this dust can be cleansed by taking the chanting of the holy names of Krishna. So, Srila Goswami is also making the same point, which will be elaborated upon in the following chapters, that the real atonement is not by following the Dharma Shastra, but the real atonement is taking to the chanting of the holy names of Krishna. Just like A man in the desert feels very thirsty, and the only thing that can satisfy the man in the desert is some water. So similarly, if Chaitanya Charitamrita explains, the tongue is dry. This tongue is very thirsty. And this thirst of the tongue can only be satisfied if some of the other one gets attached to the chanting of the holy names of Krishna. Therefore, it is said, Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtan. That is, this Sankirtan or glorification of the Lord through the process of chanting His holy name is the only process that will be victorious in this age of Kali. In this age of Kali, this is the only process that will be victorious. So, the materialist, he doesn't realize that there is one thing that is going against him, and that is time. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I am the destroyer of everything, isn't it? So time is working against the materialist. Nedriya hiriyante naktam vyavena chavavya divachasya rajan kutamba varanenava. The materialist is absorbed in spending his night in sex indulgence and sleeping. And in the daytime he's worried about where can I get some wealth, because I have all this family to maintain. So the materialist, because he's working in this mentality, he's building up things, building up a bank balance, building up a big building, building up real estate, building up property. But there's one thing that's working against him all the time, and that is time. So time destroys everything. So therefore in the Bhagavad Gita, time is considered to be the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Time is a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and time can force even the materialist to surrender. And to the atheist and materialist, how does God come? God comes in the form of death, isn't it? In the form of death, the materialist has to face death, has to face God. So, time is the factor that destroys everything. Time is the representative of the Supreme Lord, and the materialist who doesn't want to surrender to the instructions of the Supreme Lord has to surrender to the all-devouring time, and time, because it acts as the agent of the Lord, destroys everything over a period of time. There have been so many big empires, but where are those empires now? There was the Roman Empire. Where is the Roman Empire now? There was the British Empire. Where is the British Empire now? There have been so many empires. Similarly, there may be the American Empire because of the economic prosperity. It's not. These days they don't have empires the way they used to have them in the past. In the past they used to go and conquer them completely and have their own viceroys and representatives. These days they have empires by the process of economic dependence. They make the poor countries completely dependent upon the rich country. This is the way they control. But even this empire will go away. And Pāpa said that. Pāpa said this land of America is blessed with unlimited wealth. But if they do not take the Krishna consciousness, this empire will go away just like the British and the Roman Empire. So this empire will also go away. Time will destroy everything because they are not taking advantage of what the Lord has given. So the point is that time destroys everything. Lord Kapila explains to Devahuti that the materialist cannot understand that. And Lord Kapila explains to Devahuti that under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the living entity, based upon his past simple activities, enters into another body through the male semen. So it is not that one can do anything and there will be no reaction at all. The laws of karma are very strict. Every action that we perform falls into one of the three categories: karma, vikarma, or karma. Karmic activities strictly are those which are according to the Vedic rituals, but where the goal is again to realize some type of economic benefit or some type of elevation to higher planets. This is known as the system of karma kanda. Then there is karma. Karma are those activities which, as the name implies, is strictly according to the Vedic scriptures, and by the performance of which one doesn't take on sinful reactions. And then there is weak karma. That is by the performance of which one takes on sinful reaction because one is engaged in activities which are completely against the religious scriptures. So by and large, the society is engaged in performing weak karmic activities, and the Bhagavatam says that yashyatna buddhi kunapeti dhatuke swabhi kalatra desho bhoma idyadi. That is one who identifies with his place of birth, one who identifies with his body, one who identifies with his different family members, and one who considers that one should go to a place of pilgrimage just to get rid of a simple reaction, but not to understand the real purpose of going to a place of pilgrimage, is simply like a cow and an ass. Saeva go karaha. He's just like an ass and a cow. The ass has no intelligence. The ass doesn't know that he doesn't have to endeavor, carry a heavy burden all day to realize a little morsel of grass in the night. The grass has been put over there by the arrangement of the law. So, the mṛtyor Prahlād Maharaj says, Yad yathā karmani vidvan mani asarkanara karoti ato viparyāśv amogam vindanti phalam. The mṛtyor Prahlād Maharaj says, he's always making big plans, but his plans are never really successful. He just gets frustrated. Therefore, if we want to free ourselves from the misery of the different modes that are affecting us, Devi Esha Gunamai Mama Maya Duyatya, Krishna says that this material energy of mind consisting of the three modes is very difficult to overcome. So we want to free ourselves from the influence of these modes. There is only one solution, and that is to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Bhagavatam confirms that if one takes the process of devotional service, then he will be able to free himself from the influence of the modes of passion and ignorance. Kado rajas tamo bhava kama leba vyaschaye. So if one wants to free himself from the modes of passion and tama, ignorance, then he has to take stitam satya prasidhati. Then he has to take to the process of devotional service. And the process of devotional service begins by the process of chanting the holy names of Krishna. This is the key point that is being made in this whole section of the Bhagavatam, that one must take to the chanting of the holy names of Krishna. That is real atonement. And as one advances in the chanting of the holy names, then one realizes that one must chant the holy names of Krishna, avoiding the different types of offenses that we have very often discussed. If we chant the holy names of Krishna, Krishna in any case becomes very indebted to the devotee. Because Krishna says, here he's chanting my name, so I must protect him. But if we chant the names of Krishna strictly according to Krishna's desires, then Krishna guarantees such an individual will definitely return to his abode. There are different stages of chanting the holy name. The first is when one in the association of somebody hears about the difference between spiritual life and mature life. He hears about the value of chanting the holy name, and he begins to chant. Then gradually a little bit of faith develops. Then one gets initiated. Then one begins the chanting of the holy name very strictly, avoiding all the offenses, till he reaches what is known as the stage of ruchi and nishtha, till he gets a taste. And the taste of chanting the holy name of Krishna could be comparable to that of a fish. A fish cannot live outside of water even for a minute. Similarly, the devotee cannot live without Krishna even for a second. The devotee should always be absorbed in chanting Krishna's name. Krishna's name can be chanted physically, and his names can also be chanted mentally. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smana. So whatever engagement one may be doing, his Krishna can always be remembered. If one is talking to somebody, if one is preaching to someone, then one may not be able to physically chant the names of Krishna, but he can meditate upon Krishna. He can meditate upon the transcendental holy names of Krishna. So one develops ruchi, taste. That is, he doesn't want to live without Krishna's name for a second. And that gets translated into nishtha. That is complete conviction that except for chanting the holy names of Krishna, There is absolutely no other alternative at all. So one has to atone, dependent upon the degree of the sins that one has performed, and the most complete form of atonement is chanting the holy names of Krishna, and it is only the atheists who do not accept the process of atonement because they think that there is nothing after death. But those who are intelligent, they understand that there is life after death, and hence they want to atone by taking to the process of devotional service, which begins with chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Hare Krishna. There was something meaningless, right? So, any questions? Yeah, now it is. Now it is better than yesterday, today. Okay.
The group of Atonement is devotional service by chanting names of Krishna. And there are so many, numerous volumes and directions.
The 20, the Dharma Shastras are there so that everyone who doesn't come to chanting holy name, he can try the others. You follow? It's not that everyone will take to the chanting of the holy name and come to the platform of pure devotional service. For example, the Jnana Kanda, Karma Kanda, why is there reference to this in the Shastras? So that one can gradually come up. You understand? For example, following the Karma Kanda portion of the Vedas is better than not following anything at all. Following the Jnana Kanda is better than nothing at all. So, in these different Manu Samhita and these other scriptures, there is reference to the different process of atonement. And then also there is a conclusion, the highest is chanting the holy name. Therefore, Vyasadeva, even after compiling all the 4 Vedas, he was still dissatisfied. The Lord in the heart would have made him realize that he hasn't completed his task. And that's when he went to Narada Muni. And Narada Muni told him, because you haven't given the perfect solution as yet. Therefore, even after writing the 4 Vedas, you're dissatisfied. And then he wrote the Srimad Bhagavatam.
So is that a process themselves require that they give up?
Well, it may require giving up, but still the point that we made in the lecture, which is made in the 6th canto, further down in the verse of Srila Goswami, is that the taste remains. You follow? Just like the Christians, go to the church and atone. But because the taste for engaging those activities is still there, when they come out, they again resume those activities. You understand? So what we have to do is get rid of the taste. And that is only possible if you take on a positive engagement, which is the process of devotional service. And in the Bhagavatam, that beautiful example is given. Just like there may be dry leaves underneath a bamboo tree. The leaves can be burnt with fire, but the roots of those leaves go under the earth. So those roots can again fructify. You understand? Isn't it? So by these other processes of atonement, you may destroy the leaf, but the root is still there. Therefore, this verse, Srimada Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hirdi Antastori Abhadrani, is very important. Because it says, Hirdi means the heart, and Abhadrani means the impurities. It says the chanting of the holy names of Krishna is so pure that it destroys the impurities that are there in the heart. You follow? Yeah. Yes, Maharaji. Well, one can surrender to Krishna at any time, but one can serve Krishna the best when his body is healthy. Therefore, King Kulashekar has prayed that, my dear Lord, now that I have all my senses in control, please let death come to me now. So my mind is fixed in the lotus feet. Whereas if I have to die in old age, my throat will get choked up and I may not be able to remember you. So King Kulashekar has prayed that please may death come now, when my mind and my senses are in complete control and I can meditate upon you. So one can surrender to Krishna at any point, but if one surrenders to Krishna when he's hale and hearty, then that's the best. In one lecture, Prabhupada said, the old men in India, in old age, it's very common with the Maoris and rich people. In old age, they go to Vrindavan to die. So Prabhupada said in the lecture, Krishna is not a fool. You're coming to Krishna in Vrindavan just with beads, and all your bank balances have been left behind for your wife and children. So that is not a complete surrender. Hare Krishna.
Yeah.